I would like to introduce Samuel Kim, my dear colleague and friend of mine, friends from across the world, and I think it's really important to be.
So much for your time. We're really delighted to be here today. 3.5 weeks altogether to learn about the countries around. The whole idea is that we want to understand
the perspective that is visionary, that is.
This is our way of working on. So what we call tonight we're going to be heading to Tbilisi.
Welcome to the Parliament of Georgia. It's a pleasure for us to host you in our legislative body. We are always very pleased to have this kind of meetings with our friends from other countries, and I know that you have an interest to our country. We appreciate this interest, and we hope that you enjoy your stay in Georgia despite the rainy weather outside. I hope that you will have enough time to see the city, to see the country, because it is important to get the information about the country, but it is also even more important to have the kind of better understanding of the country through your kind of visit to other places in Tbilisi. So that is very important for better understanding. As for us, as for the political developments in Georgia, as for our the development of the country, I will maybe make a little introduction, if you allow me, and then we can also go into the question and answer format. We try our best to strengthen our country, to strengthen Georgia, to develop Georgia in many different fields. We try our best to strengthen the Georgian democracy. We are now quite proud of our level of democratic development. Georgia is the most democratic country in our region, and we try even to compete with the EU countries with the level of our democracy, and we try our best to achieve the best European standards in the short-term perspective. Recently we have accomplished the constitutional reform, and now we are moving to the fully parliamentary system of government, which we believe that is the most democratic system that could be suitable for our peculiarities, for Georgia's peculiarities. And we will also introduce under this system the proportional system for parliamentary elections. We believe that with the parliamentary system of government, with the proportional elections, where the pluralism is best ensured, we will avoid any kind of autocracies in a long-term perspective. We had problems with autocracies, semi-autocratic regimes in the 90s, also later on. And now with this new constitution, we believe that no autocracies will be allowed by the constitution in a long-term perspective. It will be practically impossible to establish autocratic or semi-autocratic regimes under this new constitution, which was one of the major reforms implemented by the current parliament, which was elected in October 2016. We also do our best to strengthen the judicial system, to promote the decentralization. So we have many ambitious plans to strengthen the Georgian democracy. And of course, institutional development of the parliament is one of the important aspects of this reform. We want to strengthen the lawmaking capacities of the parliament. We try our best to strengthen the oversight capacities of the parliament, to better control the activities of the executive branch. And we are quite successful in this regard. Our team is quite young. We had huge rotation in the Georgian parliament after the 2016 parliamentary elections. Around 2/3 of the members of the parliament are the completely new members, which means that we have a kind of new blood in the parliament, and we have a very ambitious team. Despite the age, the team is young, but at the same time it is very skilled and very experienced. We have very ambitious team, committee chairs, deputy speakers, etc. They play a very important role in our parliamentary activities, and their plans are ambitious. And we think that with this new composition, with a very strong team, we can essentially increase the level of the efficiency of the parliament. Our heritage was not really the best one, so the parliament again was quite weak institutionally. when we assumed our offices, and we want to leave an essentially strengthened institution for the next parliament, which will be elected in the 2020 parliamentary elections. Again, lawmaking capacities, oversight capacities should be strengthened, and this will be ensured by the team of the parliament. We are also changing the rule of procedure in order to define better regulations, especially in the field of oversight. So again, the plans in terms of democratic development are quite ambitious, and we are proud of our high level of democracy, which is evidenced by different international organizations, by different rankings. But our goal is to achieve even more, to achieve even higher standards for human rights protection. We had dramatic problems before 2012, before the change of the government, especially in the field of human rights protection. And now we are proud of our significant achievements, especially in the field of human rights protection. We had, for example, terrible situation in the prisons, and Georgia was number one in Europe with the imprisonment rate, with the prison population figure. Now we managed to reduce the number of prisoners after 2012 2.5 times, which was an essential, dramatic, very important change. The situation has improved in the prisons, but also outside the prisons we had very huge problems in terms of human rights protection, and now the citizens of Georgia enjoy much higher level of protection of their basic human constitutional rights. So again, in terms of democratic development, we are quite successful, but we want to achieve even higher standards in terms of democracy, in terms of human rights protection, and the Parliament is very actively involved in the implementation of the relevant reform agenda. Economic development is one of the top priorities for Georgia. Now, one of the most important problems for us, we are frequently talking about that, is that there is a kind of deviation between of the levels of democracy and economic development. So democracy is much more promoted than the Georgian economy, which creates always difficulties in a country. Our GDP per capita, nominal one, is currently a little bit more than 4,000 USD, which is a quite low figure. The poorest country of the European Union has twice higher GDP per capita. Bulgaria is the poorest country in the European Union, and they have around 8,000 USD, which means that we have to develop our economy rapidly in order to achieve the European standards for economic development, for social development, and that's one of the top priorities for us. And Parliament is very actively involved in the implementation of our economic reforms. Recently, the government of Georgia came up with a special plan for economic development with the so-called four-pillar program, and the Parliament has endorsed this program. And now we enjoy one of the highest economic growth rates in the region, which is 4.8%. It is the second best figure in the region, and under the region we mean not only the South Caucasus, but the broader region, including the CIS countries, Turkey, Middle Asian countries, etc. So the economic growth rate is quite high, which means that we are progressing, we are developing, but we also, in this case, we want to achieve even higher economic growth rate in order to achieve, again, the European standard of economic development. Georgia historically was playing a transit role, connecting Europe with Asia, West with East, and one of the top goals in terms of economic development is to restore this historic function for our country. Now Georgia is the only country in the region which has signed the free trade agreements with Europe, with CFTA, with Turkey, with CIS countries, and also with China. So this situation creates a very good opportunity to, again, to connect West with East, Europe with Asia. Georgia is in the best position in this regard. We are also developing our road infrastructure until 2022. The highway will cross the whole country from the western border to the eastern one, from the southern to the northern, which will also assist us in fulfilling the transit function for Georgia. Historically, Georgia was a part of the so-called Silk Road, and again, we are trying our best to again restore this function for us. We enjoy a very good environment for doing business in Georgia. We are providing very good opportunities for businesses and for the possible investors. Georgia is now number 9 on the list of doing business, which is provided by the World Bank, which means that we have a kind of low level of bureaucracy, and the taxation policy is proper for making investments in Georgia, etc. So economic development is again one of the top priorities for us, and we try our best to strengthen the economic capacities, and especially again the transit capacities is quite important. We are also building a deep sea port on the Black Sea. That will be a new port which will also assist us in better fulfilling our economic transit function. As for the foreign policy, we have a very clear vision. We have a very clear goals, foreign policy priorities, which are also reflected in a special parliamentary resolution which was adopted shortly after the parliamentary elections of 2016. Our main goal is to become the full-fledged member of the European Union and of NATO. So these are the top priorities for us. We know that these goals will not be achieved within the next 2 or 3 years period. It will take some time, but we are not losing anything. We have to implement reforms in accordance with our obligations assumed vis-à-vis NATO or European Union, and we are implementing these reforms not only not just for becoming members of NATO or EU. We are implementing these reforms, first of all, in order to strengthen the Georgian democracy, Georgian economy, to develop our country. So we are consistent in our efforts, which means that finally we think that our final goal, the full-fledged membership in the EU and the NATO, will be achieved. Again, there will be difficulties, there will be obstacles, but we will be consistent in our efforts. Finally, we think that membership in NATO and the EU is not just a matter of security, economic development, or something like that. It is, first of all, a value-based decision of the Georgian people. We believe that we belong to the Western part of the world, and we are based on the same values on which the NATO and EU are based. As for the support of the EU integration and NATO integration in Georgia, this is quite high among the general public. Around 70%, according to any polls, of the population supports the idea of EU integration and NATO integration. And if you look at the election results, it shows that more than 90% of Georgian voters voted for those political parties which strongly support both EU and the NATO integration. This means that the people's will and the government's will, respectively, to become the member of EU and NATO is very firm, and our efforts are very consistent. The main national challenge for us is connected with the occupation of our two regions, Abkhazia and the former South Ossetia, Tskhinvali region. These two historic regions of Georgia are occupied by the Russian Federation, which is again the main national challenge for us. We are pursuing the so-called pragmatic policy towards Russia, towards the Russian Federation. This policy is widely supported by our Western partners, and we try our best to have the dialogue with the Russian Federation despite the very huge problems connected to the occupation. We are applying 2 different special formats for a dialogue. One is the Geneva format, the second one is the format of 2 representatives of the Russian and Georgian governments. We managed to achieve some progress in terms of humanitarian relations with the Russian Federation, economic relations, trade, transport. But as for the political progress, it is, I would say, just zero. So it's quite difficult to achieve the political progress with the Russian Federation, and the problems in the occupied regions remain. We have human rights problems in both Abkhazia and Tskhinvali region. We have humanitarian problems, not only for ethnic Georgians which are living there, but also for other ethnic groups like Abkhazians, Ossetians, and others. The human rights situation is quite grave. Recently, one of the Georgian citizens, peaceful citizens, was killed in the prison of Tskhinvali in Tskhinvali region, and this case demonstrated that these conflicts are not just a frozen conflicts, but these conflicts lead to the death of the people, to the human rights violation on a permanent basis, which means that the international community should pay special attention to the situation in post-occupied areas. And we are working very closely with our international partners to ensure their attention to these problems, to the occupied regions. And our efforts are quite successful, so we enjoy the support from our international partners and friends. According to the resolution about the foreign policies which I have mentioned, our main strategic partner is the United States. So that is the statement which is clearly provided in the parliamentary resolution about the foreign policy priorities. We enjoy very strong relations with the United States, and of course the United States is the kind of main guarantor of Georgian sovereignty, of our efforts with regard to the territorial integrity. We have an excellent cooperation, and the last visit of the Vice President Mike Pence demonstrated again the strong support of the United States to Georgia. We very much rely on this support. We appreciate this support and friendship. We are very proud of our friendly relations, and we are happy that this friendship and cooperation continues also under the new presidential administration. So there was a lot of talks about the possible changes after the change in the U.S. government, but we even increased the level of the cooperation under the new administration, which was very important for us. Again, we have, of course, difficulties. The country is small. We have the foreign the policy challenges. We have the weak economy, which is one of the main challenges for us. But we are progressing permanently, and we think that finally Georgia will become a full-fledged member of the European and the Euro-Atlantic family of nations with much stronger economy, with even stronger democracy, and with a better positioning of Georgia in international dimensions. So that's our general vision, how we are kind of trying to develop our country. And again, we are consistent, we are patient, we are pragmatic, and we think that with this policy, finally our goals will be achieved effectively. Thank you so much.
Thank you.